of Perpetual Life. I'm so glad that you are all here. We have for you tonight, actually, 3 mystery guests. Now, I was online earlier today and I learned something fantastic and right away got a hold of my friend Aubrey de Grey to be able to come here and tell us a little bit about it. So our first speaker tonight is my good friend, and the reason that I am the officiator here at the Church of Perpetual Life, because Aubrey introduced me to Bill some years ago. He has been called a crusader against aging. He has drawn a roadmap to defeat biological aging, and he believes, as we believe, that the first person to live beyond 1,000 years old has already been born. Let's bring on Aubrey de Grey. Hello, Aubrey.
Hello, Neil. Great to be back. Thank you for having me and inviting me to give a brief summary of where my new efforts are. And thank all of you for being here. It's great always to speak to such an important and friendly audience. Really, all I want to do today is give a very brief summary of the information that I announced back on Monday, 3 days ago. So the first thing I'm going to do is paste into the chat of this Zoom call the URL of the YouTube video. It's a little bit amateur, but it exists, that has my whole talk in it. So please have a look at that at your leisure to get more details than what I'm going to say in the next few minutes. But the essence of what I'd like to tell you tonight is that the litigation, which was initiated by some of the more heavy-hitting donors to the airdrop of last year that gave $27 million to Sanders Research Foundation, has essentially concluded. 3 donors came along. Their combined contribution was 12 million out of the 27 million, which is quite a lot, obviously. And they essentially sued the foundation for fraud, and the foundation settled. So, of course, the nature of the settlement is, first of all, not public, and second of all, only the plaintiffs are allowed to know it. But anyone who wasn't born absolutely yesterday can draw their own conclusions, especially because, in consequence of this, or in the immediate aftermath of it, I have announced the creation of a new foundation. This new foundation doesn't even have a name yet, but it has plenty of activities that are going to hit the ground running, largely because most of them had already hit the ground semi-running in, let's call it, stealth mode over the past year. I have been much more active than has been superficially apparent over the past 12 months, and I am able, therefore, to really get things going fast now. Other than that, really all I want to say is that the litigation in question is not completely concluded. There's still some I's to dot and T's to cross, which is the main reason why I still have to be somewhat circumspect in what I say. But we are looking at a very short time frame in terms of how long that will remain so. And regardless of all of that, I'm delighted to say that the activities of the new foundation will be, I think, best described as a progression from the activities of Sanders Research Foundation, in the sense that they will be very much following the same philosophy, but they will be things that even SRF was perhaps not quite able to allow itself to do. Specifically, we will have 2 projects that are pretty cryonics-based. One of them very explicitly so, namely let's call it a reboot of Tanya Jones's company Aragos, I've been, as many of you will know, a very strong proponent of the technology that Tanya tried to take forward, and I worked hard to allow it to go forward over the past several years. It did nevertheless go into essentially hibernation for a short while, but I am rescuing it from that. Certainly Tanya is the one who will still very much be in charge, but with some financial resources that will make it possible. So that's just a taster. As I said, please check out this video on YouTube for my entire talk that I gave in Dublin 3 days ago, which said a good deal more about the efforts we're doing, including efforts outside of research, in other words, extending to education and advocacy and so on. And again, I apologize for the fact that even that video, that talk is somewhat circumspect about some aspects, but you won't have long to wait to hear more details. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Aubrey, and thank you. I know where you are. It's probably midnight now or past midnight, so we're very happy to have you to join us. And in that particular video that you were talking about, if anyone watches this live stream, I'm going to include the video link in an email, and it's a spectacular announcement. We're so glad to hear this, Aubrey, and we stand behind you. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Neil. Thank you.
The second part of our talk tonight comes from a presentation we had back several months ago, and it was a dynamic arrangement of information from our friend Dr. Sandra Kaufmann. So we're going to go ahead and show the presentation and question and answer from Dr. Kaufmann's event back in May, which was one of the times we were meeting in person. So let's go ahead and roll that video. And we have another guest speaker, another surprise after this presentation. So stay with us, enjoy this presentation and the third part of our event tonight.
Welcome. Welcome to the Church of Perpetual Life. I'm so glad you are here. My name is Neil Vandry, and I am your officiator here tonight. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the second in-person service here at Church of Perpetual Life since the pandemic. So now we've had two meetings in a row here at our new church in Pompano Beach. Who's here in Pompano Beach for the first time? First time in Pompano Beach? I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming to the event. In addition to all of you here, I'd like to also welcome everyone who's streaming online. We have two ways they're coming in. They're in Zoom. In Zoom they're watching, and also they're watching the live stream that we have. So we welcome all of you who are Zooming in here tonight and in live streaming. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I have to tell you that we are going back to Zoom next month. We're going to be going back to Zoom next month until October. October we'll be back in person again. So join us in Zoom if you are able. I urge you to do that. We pray that the COVID-19 numbers will stop rising and fall again. Our meeting will be in Zoom on the fourth Thursday in June 23rd. And if this is your first time joining us here at the Perpetual Life, I'd like to invite you to also join our email list so that we can keep giving you the updates on health and longevity and keep you posted on all that's going on here and around the world. And you can email me if you're online and you'd like to receive the information monthly. Just email me from the email on our website at perpetual.life. I'd like to share our creed with you now. Our creed here at the Church of Perpetual Life. We believe that all life is sacred and that we have been given this one life to make unlimited. We believe in our Creator's divine plan for all of humanity to have infinite lifespans in perfect health and eternal joy, rendering death to be optional. By following our gospel, we achieve eternal life, creating a heaven here on earth. We follow Nikolai Fedorov, who taught that the transcendence of the Creator will only be solved when humanity, in our unified efforts, become an instrument of universal resuscitation, when the divine word becomes our divine action. And we follow Arthur C. Clarke, who said the only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. And so we enter each day energized in spirit and empowered by the words of our prophets to live in joy, serving our Creator and all of mankind forever and ever. Speaking of Fedorov, we have a special presentation here tonight at the table. We want to thank David London for doing that. So as you leave the room tonight, on the left side, we have an informational table, some information on Nikolai Fedorov, and David can tell you a lot about that. He has studied him. Our first speaker tonight is Dr. Sandra Kaufmann. Dr. Kaufmann began her academic career in the field of cellular biology, earning a master's degree from the University of Connecticut in tropical ecology and plant physiology. Turning to medicine, she received her medical degree at the University of Maryland and completed a residency and fellowship at Johns Hopkins in the field of pediatric anesthesiology. For the last 5 years, she has been the chief of pediatric anesthesia at the Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital, a nationally recognized center of excellence. Most recently, she was recognized as Best in Medicine by the American Health Council. Her avid interest in the science of anti-aging began many years ago as an intense hobby. Utilizing her knowledge in cell biology, human pharmacology, and physiology, this hobby has now become a main focus. The project represents years of non-clinical research leading to the first ever comprehensive theory of aging. Dr. Kaufmann is famous for her book titled The Kaufmann Protocol. We have a couple in the library. Let's welcome Dr. Sandra Kaufmann and her presentation tonight, The Kaufmann Protocol. Winning the Glycation Battle.
Woo-hoo. Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. A few caveats. For those who were here a few years ago, I have spoken, but it was at the previous church, and I saw a lot of familiar faces, and I look forward to speaking with you guys after this is done. So number one, thank you for allowing me back. Caveat two, I haven't spoken in front of real people in about 2 years. I've been staring at screens, so I am so excited that you guys are here and there's expressions and interaction, so this is amazing, but I will also tell you I'm a whiff rusty. So if I trip over a few words, I apologize ahead of time. Anyway, okay, so the Kaufmann Protocol, if you guys are familiar with this, you age in 7 tenets per me, and there's ways to take on each of these 7 tenets. And today we're going to talk about winning the glycation battle. And as a brief review, in my world, the 7 tenets, you age because your DNA ages. Tenet 1, you have mitochondrial failure, pathway failure, repair mechanisms, immune problems, individual cell requirements. And I'm not going to go into all of that because I think I bored you with that years ago, and there's a whole book about it, blah, blah, blah. We are going to focus on waste management. And the big thing in this category is, of course, glycation. So that's where we're going to focus our energies tonight. All right. There are many, many, many ways to fight the glycation battle. I'm kind of obsessed over these 6. There are more. But these are the big 6, so we're going to pick them off one at a time. Number 1, we're going to block carbohydrate digestion. We're going to jump right in here, right? When you eat carbohydrates, your body needs to break them down into smaller and smaller chunks, ultimately getting to monosaccharides and disaccharides, so that you can absorb them and then you have glucose, right? Easiest way to avoid this, number 1, don't eat them, but that would not be fun, and I'm a donut eater, admittedly. But if you do eat them and then you're in your gut, let's avoid trying to break them down. Just a smidge, all right? So we're going to do that with 2 enzymes. Alpha amylase, you have 2 types of alpha amylase. The first one comes from your salivary glands, and it starts the digestion process. But when that gets to your stomach, it sort of gets destroyed. So the one that we're thinking about actually comes from your pancreas. So alpha amylase from the pancreas takes these giant carbohydrates and chops them into smaller pieces. Next, let's see. Got ahead of myself, I apologize. This is called rustiness. Alpha amylase, the shorter chains are dextrins and maltose. They're calcium dependent, so if you are calcium deficient, they don't work as well, as a side note. If you block alpha amylase too much, and you'll see all of these things that we talk about, if you block them too much, you're going to cause yourself to have some problems. So the idea is to block all 6 of these things just a bit. So cumulatively, you'll make a huge dent in the glycation problem. So if you block too much alpha amylase, you end up with a whole lot of gas and flatulence, and your friends are not going to like you. So reduce it a whiff, but not in entirety. Alpha glucosidase is a bit different. It lives in your small intestine, in the brush border, right? So as the oligosaccharides come in, they get digested a little bit more into mono and disaccharides, and they get absorbed, right? If you slow this down or you decrease it by a certain percentage, you're going to decrease the amount of glucose that ultimately gets into your blood system, all right? So that's a good thing. But again, you don't want to do it entirely because there's actually a disease called pump-based disease, which is a glycogen storage disease, that if you don't have any of this enzyme, your life is going to be absolutely horrible. So again, you want to decrease these things a whiff, not in entirety. So these things work together, right? The alpha amylase breaks it into some bits, glucosidase blocks it into smaller bits. So at the end of all this, together, you're going to end up decreasing the amount of carbohydrates that you have now absorbed. That's right, lesson number 1. That's kind of cool. How do we do this? There are 3 pharmaceutical drugs that actually do this. Acarbose is the most popular. It was the first one that's commercially available and probably the best one. It's a pseudo tetrasaccharide. So it sort of pretends that it's a large glucose molecule. It's not, but it is, and it's a competitive inhibitor. And it's very, very, it likes to go to these enzymes. It has 100 times the affinity as a normal polysaccharide would. So it's very effective. The other ones are a little less effective. The miglitol and the voglibose only inhibit alpha-glucosidase. Acarbose gets both of the enzymes. But again, having tried a whole lot of acarbose, I will tell you that your friends will not be happy with you. It does work, just do it in isolation. The good news is that there are natural inhibitors if you don't like actual medications. Things that hit alpha amylase in isolation, we have ursolic acid, one of my favorites, allegic acid. The alpha glucosidase inhibitors, there are a lot of those. But most importantly, there are a lot of things that do it together, right? Andrographylide is one of my favorite substances. And it's one of my favorite substances because it also helps your brain for a variety of other reasons that we won't talk about right now. Chlorogenic acid, you're going to see again and again and again in this lecture because it is amazing for lowering glucose, and this is one of the first things that it does. And I also like fucodan. Comes from seaweed, and it actually changes your brown fat to white fat ratio. So a lot of these things do things in many categories, and this is just one. All right, step 2. Now we've reduced the amount of glucose going into your circulation from your diet. Now we're going to decrease the amount coming from your metabolism. There's a very important enzyme called glucose-6-phosphate translocase. It's involved in 2 major systems. The first one is breaking down the glycogen that you already have. That is called glucogenolysis. The second thing is making new glucose, and that's gluconeogenesis. So by affecting both of these systems, you are seriously controlling the amount of glucose that goes into your system, right? That's kind of cool. Obviously, the liver controls most of this glucose, so that's where the enzyme lives. It's also scattered around in the rest of your organs as well. How do we inhibit this? Well, there's some cool things sort of hidden out there. In some fungus and some bacteria, there are a few things. But the one thing that we can actually use is chlorogenic acid. Right? It's in coffee, it's in yerba mate, great stuff for you. Just to drive home the point that you don't want to overdo all of these things, if you inhibit this to a huge degree, you're going to get a different kind of glycogen storage disease called von Gerke's disease, which is not attractive. Okay, the next step. Now we've got our circulation, we've got our blood, our glucose floating around in our bloodstream. We want to get that glucose into your cells where it can't do any harm. There are 13 transporters. The 4th is probably the most important, which is why we're going to talk about it here. And it sits in your fat cells and it sits in your muscle cells, both your skeletal and your cardiac muscle cells. It's insulin regulated, and the receptor's kind of cool. It doesn't live on the cell surface. It lives in the cytoplasm. When your cell gets stimulated, it sends it to the membrane, and it brings in glucose. It's facilitated diffusion. And when the glucose comes in, it gets phosphorylated. Phosphorylated glucose gets trapped in the cell, and then it just sort of continues the system, right? And cells are smart. I love cells. I was a cell biologist. Cells are smart. So your cell tells your body what it needs, right? So if a cell already has enough glucose in it, the system turns off, right? If you are obese or your cell is full of fat, you're not going to upregulate these transporters, right? If your muscle isn't working and doesn't need glucose, so let's say you've got muscle atrophy or denervation, it's not going to upregulate. But if you're exercising, or if it's stimulated by thyroid hormone per se, your cell goes, I really need this glucose, receptor gets upregulated, you bring in more glucose, and you're doing well, right? Well, let's cheat the system. We can upregulate this pharmacologically, right? So this is a list of things to do it. And I want to point out that a lot of these things show up on the same lists. So again, andrographolide is the second one on this list, which is amazing. And I can guarantee you everyone in this room is probably on resveratrol, right? Probably, or some version thereof. Maybe, nods, stares, maybe. Perfect. And if you're not, you should be. Okay. The next trick up our sleeve is aldose reductase. And this is going to be a little bit off kilter, but it'll make sense in the end. When you are diabetic, or just like us and have a normal amount of glucose, it goes into cells, and aldose reductase turns it into something called sorbitol. Sorbitol is brutal, and sorbitol can't get out of cells. So in diabetics, when sorbitol accumulates, it causes a lot of tissue damage. The cell swells, it degenerates, becomes apoptotic, and it dies. So especially in diabetics, you really want to block this enzyme. Now, the other thing that happens is that the sorbitol in an NAD-dependent reaction turns into fructose. Everyone goes, oh, fructose, fruit, that's amazing, that's great. It's not. Fructose is 7 to 10 times more glycosylating than glucose. So we don't want that either. So by blocking the ability to make sorbitol and or fructose, we just saved ourselves, number one, diabetic damage. Even if we're not diabetic, I think we're all pre-diabetic. But it saved our cells, and it prevents a lot of glycosylation. So we want a little bit of inhibition of our aldose reductase. Can we do it? Of course we can, right? Right? Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about it. Okay, epalrestat is another pharmacological drug. You don't want a ton of it, but you want some of it. It's non-competitive and reversible inhibitor of this enzyme. We know that it lowers sorbitol, and we know that we use it clinically in diabetics for disease states, especially diabetic neuropathy, right? I would argue that by the time you have diabetic neuropathy, it's probably a little bit too late. So I like to think that let's be preventative, let's do it ahead of time, right? We know that it crosses the blood-brain barrier, so we know that it's going to get into your head, and it's going to help you control all of these evil things. We also know that it affects, decreases AGE formation and blah, blah, blah. So it's a good thing. All right, natural aldose reductase inhibitors, of course, there are a ton. Interestingly enough, my favorite ones are not on this list, which is unfortunate, but allegic acid is amazing. I don't know how many people are on that. Quercetin, I'm sure everyone here is on quercetin, right? I need to get some head bobbing going. I feel like I'm talking to a screen again. All right, apigenin, curcumin, right? Everybody? Yes? Thank you. Good. We need some energy. It's a little cold in here, a little cryogenic. Okay. Now the big category. We've got the glucose in our systemic system, right? It's floating around. What are we going to do now? Because it's going to create AGEs. We all know what that is, right? Advanced glycation end products, right? We're all familiar with this. Quick review, just so we're all on the same page. You take a sugar, some oxidative stress, and voila, the glucose sticks to things and it just destroys them, right? So if it's a protein, it's an AGE. If it's a lipid, it's an ALE. Otherwise, it's a less exciting DNA/AGE. They need a better acronym for that, but they haven't come up with one yet. Okay, what sugars are we talking about? It's not just glucose, right? There's three basic types here. Aldohexoses are glucose and galactose. Ketohexidose is fructose. As I mentioned before, fructose is 7 to 10 times more reactive than glucose. There's way less of it in your system, but it's absolutely horrible for you, okay? And then lastly, the aldopentose, which is ribose, and ribose is even more reactive, hundreds of times more reactive. And I actually looked this up. I'm like, do we ever eat ribose? And apparently there's a product out there that they're selling like, ooh, like up your ribose levels, and I can't imagine that anyone would actually purchase it because it sounds really terrible. But it does exist. Okay, so as AGEs when you get to the end, there are probably 20 or 30 of them, but they go through basically 3 intermediates. And to get from a glucose protein down to the bottom is like 8 steps. But these are the big 3 intermediates that you've probably heard of. And you don't need to know all of these big words because it's kind of silly, but I'm telling you this for a reason, and we'll get to that in a second. So number 1, glyoxyl. Glyoxyl leads to several things, importantly, carboxymethyl lysine. Pay attention to that lysine part. Carboxyethyl arginine, carboxyethyl cysteine, and then a variety of other things that really aren't that important. The key here is the 3 amino acids. Okay, remember that. So this is glyoxyl, then there's methylglyoxyl. All right, this is more reactive, and interestingly enough, it is 50,000 times more reactive than glucose. So this stuff is toxic, very toxic. Here, again, it's not, instead of carboxymethyl, it's carboxyethyl, but it's still clinging to the lysine. All right. There's also the argopyrimidine is actually arginine, so it's close. The idea is that it's attacking the same amino acids. And then the last one, which I'm not going to say too much about because it's pretty boring, and I always mispronounce this, 3-oxyglucosone. This is only important because it reacts with the pentoses. But again, the pentoses react with the lysine and the arginine, same amino acids that the other ones did. So what is the take-home message here? These 3 amino acids, when they are embedded in your proteins, get attacked, and they're a huge problem in terms of AGE production, right? That's the take-home message. So we're going to backtrack a whiff. Why are AGEs bad? I'm sure you guys all know this. I was thinking I shouldn't even put this in there, but I'm going to. Production of free radicals, right? Carbonyl stress, oxidative stress, alters proteins and lipids, makes proteins and enzymes not as functional. Things become more immunogenic, right? Leads to autoimmune diseases. Glycation of histones actually is one of the reasons that people get lupus, which is sort of interesting. And then huge inflammatory response. AGEs by themselves are inflammatory, and when they hit RAGEs, the receptors, and we'll try to talk that in a bit, that's also hugely reactive. And then, of course, they stick to long-lived tissues. They destroy your collagen, which is why our faces droop over time, and our vasculature and all that sort of stuff sort of fails. But in general, the whole point of AGEs is that it causes tissue damage. All right, back to our amino acids. All right, so if we think about our general plan, right, we tried to reduce the amount of glucose getting into our bodies. It's in your vasculature. Now what are we going to do with it? We're going to try to prevent it from landing on things that are bad, right? And we know that it likes amino acids, and it likes amino acids that are embedded in proteins. But I call this the amino acid decoy system. Let's send in the amino acids that it's going to stick to so that you have your glucose, or any other sugar, and your amino acid in isolation, and you can excrete it at your kidney, no harm nor foul, and you just lost some glucose molecules. And this actually works. It really does, right? You're not creating more AGEs because it's not sticking to the full protein. You're just sticking to individual amino acids. And there's evidence that arginine does it, lysine does it, and cysteine does it. And the cool thing about cysteine is N-acetylcysteine is also an amazing free radical scavenger. So that's like a huge twofer on that one. I know it sounds ridiculous, and people are like, really, you want me to take amino acids for this? And the answer is yes. Take them with every meal, and your blood sugar will be like very happy. Okay, step 2. The glucose is floating around in your vasculature. We want to block it from landing on the proteins. So the other thing you can do is you can block the landing site on the protein. That's kind of clever, right? Just block the front door. So aspirin does this. Aspirin acetylates lysine. Okay? So when you have aspirin sitting there, well, when it's acetylated, glucose can't land there. Et voila. One of the reasons aspirin is so great for you. Interestingly, diclofenac does it as well. Diclofenac is a prescription drug. It's a fantastic anti-inflammatory, but it blocks AGE production, and this is how it does it. Now on to one of my new favorite drugs, and you guys are going to be laughing like, she's crazy. Pioglitazone. It's a horrible name, but it's amazing. And it does several things, and we're going to get to all of the other things it does in just a second, but it also blocks AGEs through this process of blocking the site that the glucose lands on the proteins. Why is pioglitazone so cool? Okay, First, it stimulates, and I always screw this one up, peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma. So I apologize for cheating and looking at the screen on that. But that is the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. So number one, the first thing this thing does is it boosts your mitochondria. That's pretty cool. Secondly, it helps our glucose transporters 1 and 4. Remember we talked about making 4 upregulate? This does that. Decreases the output of glucose from the liver. Another fantastic thing. In some cell models, it increases messenger RNA levels of sirtuin and klotho. They didn't go as far as measuring the actual things, but the MRA went up, so hopefully by extension, the proteins did as well. Sends your rages down, sends your soluble rages up. Again, we'll talk about that in a second. But here's a really cool thing that it does as well. We all know that as you get older, fat distribution changes, right? Fat in your skin, your subcutaneous skin, dissipates and it accumulates in your middle, right? I call it the abdominal tire syndrome. And you can look at people's faces and go, wow, they're just not as like big and vibrant, right? And people go, well, you don't want fat, but you know you want fat in certain places and you want it subcutaneously. Pioglitazone takes the fat out of your viscera and sticks it back in your skin. That is amazing. When I first read it, I'm like, fat, I don't want to be fat, but that's cool. That is extremely useful. All right? All right. Continuing the path of how to get rid of AGEs, I'm sure we've all heard of aminoguanine. I hope, maybe we have. It is the first compound. It's a hydrazine derivative, which is why it does this. You can still buy it, but it's not so great. Does block AGE and glucose-induced protein linking, and that's kind of cool, because when proteins get close to each other and they have AGEs, they stick, they get linkages, and then it causes a protein or collagen death and that sort of thing. Half-life is very short, and people don't like to take it because if you take too much, you're going to get a B6 deficiency. So it's not a great one, but I threw it in there for historical purposes. Pyridoxamine, also in the B family, it's fantastic for blocking AGEs. Very hard to get. A few years ago you could buy it, now you really can't. It's kind of a little challenging, but it works basically the same way because it too is a hydrazine derivative. Other prescription medications. I know people kind of freak out about it. I talk about prescription medications and over-the-counter stuff. In my mind, it doesn't matter. Molecules are molecules, efficacy is efficacy. If you have to get a script or buy from overseas or whatever, really what's the difference as long as it works? So the other kind of nice thing about the first two here is if you happen to have high blood pressure, very particular high blood pressure medicines also block AGE production, right? So in this case, ACE inhibitors are very good at blocking AGE production. My favorite is lisinopril. So I don't have high blood pressure, but I take a bit of lisinopril. Can't hurt, right? It's got to help you. Captopril is one that the big studies have been on, but lisinopril works exactly the same way. Secondly, the angiotensin receptor blockers, all the sartans. I know people that are on these things are dying to get off. They want to be healthier so they don't have to take blood pressure medicine. I would argue that, look at it the other way. If you need it, take one that's going to help you in a different category, right? And of course, metformin helps a bit with the early stages of glycation, but it's not as good as the other ones. Okay. Non-prescription agents that help with AGE, blockade. Before I had said that it's about 8 steps between a glucose and a protein to your final AGE. All of these things do it in different steps. So it's not all the same. I just clumped them all together because otherwise I would be here for like days and days and days explaining all of this. But a lot of the things that you guys are on that are very popular help. And again, chlorogenic acid, we've seen that on several lists, so that's a great one to do. Resveratrol, again, curcumin, one of my favorites, blah, blah, blah. In terms of the terpenoids, ursolic acid is especially good as well because it actually gets rid of fat and helps you build muscle. So that's another one of my favorites. Continuing on this list, we see lots of things. Berberine carnosine is amazing, and I probably spoke about that the last time because I always talk about carnosine. It is a naturally occurring dipeptide. Everyone has it. Men have more than women. Young people have more than old people. It's an amazing agent in terms of glycation. Even better than just taking it orally, it comes in eye drops. There's something called N-acetylcarnosine eye drops, and it can reverse presbyopia, which is like, you know, needing reading glasses, as well as cataracts. So that's kind of cool. Capsaicin, spermidine helps a lot because it protects DNA. I like to consider it as a DNA bubble wrapping system, and it prevents glucose from coming in to destroy your DNA. So that's quite helpful. Lastly, I'm very entertained by honeybee venom, because I just had this idea that even if you get bit or stung, I guess, by a bee and you're about to die, you can take solace in the fact that your hemoglobin is less glycated, right? There's always an upside to this stuff. Okay, back to our bloodstream with our little glucose molecules in it. Now we've got glucose, and some of it made it through all of these traps and is now actually sticking to a protein, so we've got some AGEs floating around. Well, the good news is we could actually reverse that a bit. In the early stages, remember I said there were about 8 steps. In the early stages, you can actually take the glucose molecule off of your protein. It's called transglycosylation. And these are the things that we know do it. Hydralazine is amazing at it. Caveat to hydralazine is that it also is a blood pressure medication, and it is used in emergency situations when you have very high blood pressure, you need to bring your pressure down quickly. So it's really potent. That being said, if you take a little bit for a long period of time, you can develop tolerance to it, which what I have done. So I take a ton of it. Don't recommend that to anyone off the bat because you will kill yourself. That being said, if anyone's interested, I can sort of give you the formula as to how to do that. But it's a hydralazine, it's a hydrazine derivative, so it's amazing in terms of ripping glucose off of the early stages of AGEs. Carnosine again does it, glutathione does it, and cysteine does it. That's another one of our amino acids that glucose gets attracted to. Okay, so now we've got vasculature, we've got AGEs, and we're stuck with them. Now what do we do? Well, now we pull out the AGE sponge system, right? Gotta hit this at every level. Lactoferrin is a crazy AGE sponge. So lactoferrin is an iron-binding, non-heme, iron-binding glycoprotein. It's in breast milk, it's in tears, it's basically in every fluid that you excrete, right? And it's supposed to carry iron, non-heme iron, so that it floats around your body and it does all of those wonderful things. The second thing it does, it's very important in your, the system against bacteria, right? And if you actually have your lactoferrin measures leveled and it's a high level, your primary care guy is going to say, oh my God, you are just horribly infected. You've got this immune system problem. You're just in serious trouble. However, if you take it exogenously, lactoferrin is a sponge for AGEs. It is a long molecule. If you look at it under a microscope, very powerful microscope, it would look like a barbell or a bow tie, right? A glob with a little thing in the middle. It has 2 binding sites for what's called the ABCD motif. So it actually sticks to AGEs. 2 of them per molecule, because there's 1 on each side. It floats around, sucks up your AGEs, and you excrete it. That is amazing. I think it's amazing. Okay, lastly, we're getting to the end. I know this is a lot. The receptors for AGEs, we all know about the receptors, right? They sit on the cell membrane. When an AGE hits that receptor, one of 2 things happen. Either it becomes taken into the cell and you destroy the AGE, that would be nice, right? But what generally happens is the AGE precipitates a reaction, all right? And you get oxidative stress, you get inflammatory issues, you get thrombotic problems, so you do not want these rages becoming activated. That's just a no-no, right? The good news, and this is where people always make fun of me because they come up with the strangest illusions, but they always make sense in the end. If you think about this receptor made up of lots of different pieces, and if you imagine it being made out of Legos, right? Got a few in the membrane and a few on the top. The one on the top of the membrane is the one that sticks to the AGE, okay? And that, like a Lego, that can come off, right? That is called the soluble piece of your receptor. And you can have that separate for 2 reasons. Either A, it can just fall off, or 2, you can actually make it separately. And it doesn't really matter. If you cleave it, it's a C rage, and if you make it separately, it's an S rage. But they are both, ES rage, but otherwise they are both called S rages. It's a soluble piece of the receptor. Why is this important? Because these act as decoys, sucking up the AGEs in your system, right? The AGE sticks to this piece, nothing happens because there's no receptor attached to a cell, and you excrete it. So between that and the lactoferrin, that is your cleanup system. All right, how do you make more of these? What's really cool, exercise does this. I don't know why, but exercise causes you to create more soluble rages. Green tea does it. ECGC does it. And then just to come full circle, pioglitazone does it, which is the drug I talked about before. It's kind of cool. Okay, so we're just going to quickly, because I know this is a lot, recap. Number one, keep glucose from getting into your blood system in the first place. 2, block the ability to make extra glucose. 3, drive it into your cells so it doesn't cause any problems. 4, the stuff that does get into your cells, you want to minimize the damage. 5, you want to block AGE creation. And then 6, if you have AGEs, you got to initiate your cleanup system. And there you have it. That's how we defeat glycation. Any questions, or am I passing over the baton?
Thanks to Dr. Kaufmann for her presentation. Patricia, you have a question?
I listened to a lecture last night by Bob Kilpatrick from St. Petersburg, Florida. He was saying one of the major problems that we have with our cooking technique with our meats is that we cook them over 300 degrees. And he said, and I didn't know this, he said there's some sugars in meat. And when the sugars and the fat heat over 300 degrees, it can be very procancerous. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. So there are AGEs in all the food that we eat. How you cook meat is especially important. It's also in breads, just a lot of foods that you eat. There's actually an anti-glycation or anti-AGE diet, which is actually very good for diabetics. I went through the whole how to make your diet better in terms of cooking. It's hard. You have to keep the temperatures low. You have to simmer food for absolutely forever. You cannot caramelize anything. I would venture to guess that if you don't want to change your diet, you have to accept the fact that you are eating AGEs. 20% of your AGEs sort of get cleaned out naturally. They're just not going to absorb. The rest of them, I would initiate the cleanup maneuver and go with the lactoferrin and other ways to sort of fight that off. But you're absolutely right. You consume AGEs all the time.
Thank you, Doctor. I have a question from Zoom land. So a question from Zoom from Tom. What device does Dr. Kaufmann use to measure glycation, and how can we get it?
That's an excellent question. There is a really cool skin scanner. It comes from the Netherlands. It's called an AGE reader. There's a big office one you can get, or there's a little handheld thing you can get. I have the little handheld, and you put it on your skin. It goes, and it tells you how glycated you are. In lieu of that, a short-term glycation is obviously your hemoglobin A1C, and beyond that, you're sort of stuck.
Other questions for Dr. Kaufmann? Here we go. Dave?
Dave from Pompano Beach. Thank you, doctor. Very interesting speech. But once you determine, and I'm very unfamiliar with all this stuff, but once you determine your level of glycation, how do you determine the treatment, or how many of these chemicals or pills to take, I guess?
So it depends on your level of commitment. I was kind of thinking that you guys here at the Church of Perpetual Life would go, yeah, I'm doing them all. In reality, I like to think that you pick 1 or 2 in each category.
So it's mixed with exercise, is that right?
Exercise definitely helps. Every step that you take is going to decrease it slightly incrementally, right? So let's say if you hit each category 10 to 20%, by the time you get to the end, you made a significant reduction. And any reduction is better than no reduction.
Do you have a list of exercises maybe in your book?
Exercises? Oh, heck no. No, I'm not an exercise therapist. When you read the studies, it says, Joe Schmo exercised for X number of hours and blah, 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 blah. What they actually did is beyond me. The idea in terms of getting glucose in and that sort of thing is just to make the cells require glucose. If that's resistance or not, I really don't know. But I'm more of a chemical-based person. I am an exercise nut, but it's not why I do it.
I have a question from Dr. Howard.
Hi there. Thank you so much. Great presentation.
You're going to have a good question because you've been staring at me the whole time.
I pay attention.
Okay.
Excellent presentation. Very, very important issues that you're speaking about here. You said you take a little lisinopril. What would be your dosing protocol for that, and also the hydralazine protocol?
So I do not have high blood pressure, and because I'm also on hydralazine, I take the smallest dose I can, which is 2.5 milligrams a day. Hydralazine is tough because depending on your blood pressure, it's going to precipitate a total downfall. So I started with 10 milligrams and thought I was going to die. So I reduced that to 2.5, got to 5, got to 10. Now I take 50 milligrams 3 times a day. Everything comes with a caveat. The caveat to hydralazine is because you're deglycosylating some DNA. It theoretically can precipitate autoimmune issues. So I'm very much on the lookout for that. So if you're going to give that to your patients, just know that there are risks and benefits to all of this stuff.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Kaufmann, we have a question from Zoom. By Brent, how can we keep glucose levels low?
That kind of seems self-evident.
Yes. Another question from Rudy. What other metrics, systems, tests can be used to provide real feedback about whether our protocols are working?
So that's an excellent question. Glycation is a particularly tough one. If you're in lab studies, you can measure all of these intermediates, you can measure all of these AGE products, but there's no place that I know of that you can probably do this right now. There's some geniuses in this conference room or church, so perhaps you guys can invent a system to measure that. That'd be fantastic.
Okay, good. Here's a question. Here's Ray.
How are you?
Good,
Great
yourself?
presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Are there any diets that you do prescribe that you think are better than certain other diets, like a vegan diet over this, that makes that kind of a difference that you would
So
prefer?
every diet has pros and cons, right? My suggestion is always to do everything in moderation. So as an example, if you're a vegan, people swear that they do well with that, but then you're short of carnosine and other very specific vitamins. Every diet choice has a pro and a con. And so depending on who you are and what your concomitant medical problems are, that's a very individualized decision. And it also has to do with personal commitment. I've tried a variety of them. I'm a junk food junkie. I'm not supposed to say that in public, but I do. But the reason I say it is because you don't have to be perfect to do these things. Whatever you do, you can sort of try to fend off the damage. I remember when we did this the last time, some guy said, do I have to give up cigars? And I said, absolutely not. That's your choice, right? But know the damage comes with a cigar. So for example, we know that every puff has like 30 billion free radicals in it. So if you are going to make that choice, take a whole lot of things that block free radicals, right? As a junk food junkie, I block carbohydrates, I block glucose, I block this, I block that. So but every dietary choice is going to have different pros and cons. So the answer is, I guess, no. That's a really long answer to no.
Dr. Kaufmann, we have a question from Zoom. Does toasting bread produce glycation? Is it better to eat it without toasting?
Yeah. Anytime you brown something, you are making AGEs. Absolutely.
Okay. James?
Intermittent fasting and what you eat when you eat.
Mm-hmm.
Could you address that? Protein versus of course, protein's probably better than carbohydrates.
So intermittent fasting is amazing, and it's one of the few things that's demonstrated to take care of probably 4 out of the 7 reasons that you age. So it's astounding. The biggest thing it does, it activates AMP kinase, which puts you sort of in a state of hibernation. So your sirtuins get activated, your mTOR gets deactivated. Does a whole lot of really good things for you. So absolutely, if you can do that, do it.
What about the, 18 hours without eating?
I don't think the actual hourage makes a big difference. If you can make it anywhere between 10 to 16, you're activating your AMP kinase. Anything above that is just grandiosity. Right? People are like, oh, I've gone 3 days. Well, congratulations. But it takes about 10 to 16 hours to activate your AMP kinase.
We have a question in the back.
I appreciate the fact that you do a lot of supplementation, and I wanted to address other remedies such as C60, fullerenes, and things like that that may help support what you're doing through supplements.
Thank you. I have gone through, I don't care if something is natural, not natural, made up yesterday, been around for 3,000 years. If something is efficacious, I am all for it, as long as you look at the risk-benefit ratio and determine that that something is good for you. So you're absolutely right. There are many, many ways to skin a cat. C60 has pluses and minuses. I don't tend to use it myself, but a lot of people do with very good results.
What are your favorite junk foods?
I am a donutaholic. I eat a donut every day for breakfast. I like chocolate frosting, little sprinkles.
Not recommending that.
I follow it with diclofenac, hydralazine, and a whole lot of amino acids, if that helps.
Recommending not to have donuts.
Yeah,
okay.
don't follow my bad example.
So, Dr. Kaufmann, are ages higher in heated meats than in other foods?
It has to do with the protein load and the glucose load and the temperature, right? Because if you think about an AG, the same thing that happens in your body happens while you're cooking. So you need a glucose, not a glucose, you need a sugar, which is either glucose, fructose, ribose, and then you need the heat, which is cooking, and then you need time, because a lot of these things are quite slow, and you just need the appropriate conditions. So essentially, well, I mean, they're both going to do it, right? Because the meats have the proteins with the amino acids are going to be reactive, and the carbohydrates have the glucose. So the answer is, I think that they're both pretty darn glycosylating.
We have a question in the back and over here. Let's go back here to Don. Don?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you said you eat a donut every day?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your glucose reading? Is it under, your A1C, is it under 5.7 or 5.8?
I haven't tested it recently, but it's pretty damn low.
Is that, if you're over that, you're pre-diabetic.
It's pretty damn low.
Okay.
I know you're absolutely appalled by my behavior, and I apologize. But I also take 67 agents a day, so with any luck, I've outsmarted my body.
Okay, here's a question from Dave.
Sorry again, Doc, but yeah, your speech was fascinating overall. I just eliminated sugar from my diet recently to help lose weight. So you mentioned coffee. So coffee is okay?
Oh, coffee is fantastic.
So
chlorogenic acid is one of the best things you could possibly do for your glycation.
So for sugar substitutes, I take xylitol,
As long as it's not a reactive sugar molecule. And you have to just look it up. I don't know what the reaction of that one is, because people used to think that fructose was so much better than glucose, and in fact, it's way worse.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of what the glycation potential of it is.
Okay, but sugar substitutes overall are better than sugar itself, right? Sugar's bad.
Depends what the substitute is.
Depends on the substitute. I have a question from Chase over here.
It's less of a question and more of a point, since a lot of people were asking about what foods have AGEs in them. You can look up on Google AGEs in food, and there are studies that have basically infinitely long Excel spreadsheets that list exactly how much AGEs are in each food and at what temperature you cook them and for how long. So if you're interested in your own diet and personalizing it, that's what you look for. I've personally done that before, so.
Yeah, but you're 12, so I'm not sure if that counts.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Dr. Sandra Kaufmann and the Kaufmann Protocol great thanks.
Be sure to email me your questions, and I'll be very happy to put you in direct contact with those speakers that have the answers for you. A little bit about RAADfest, the Revolution Against Aging and Death Festival, coming in just 2 weeks. Live in person in San Diego, California. It is also, I understand, a hybrid meeting, so you can go virtually as well. But we have now a brief video to show you a little bit about the RAAD Festival. All right, the RAADfest. And I have to say that I'm very thrilled to have as our third mystery guest tonight, none other than James Strole, the co-founder and co-director of People Unlimited and the executive director of the Coalition for Radical Life Extension, who are the producers of the RAADfest. Jim is a leading anti-death activist and community builder. He has spoken and written on radical life extension and physical immortality for over 4 decades. He has dedicated his life to challenging death-oriented beliefs and practices. And we're glad to have Jim with us tonight. He has coached thousands of people to live an ageless lifestyle, to achieve healthier, fuller, more vibrant lives. Jim is co-author to the book, Just Getting Started, 50 Years of Living Forever. He has appeared on numerous shows, both domestically and abroad, and has spoken to audiences on 4 continents. Welcome with me now, Mr. James Strole. Hello, Jim.
Well, thank you, Neil, for that great introduction, and thank you for having me on. And my apologies for having to talk out of my car because I was, traveling around town in town today. So if I hope you can see me okay, a little bit of sunlight coming through my windshield here, but it looks like I'm showing up pretty good. But thank you, Neil, again, and thank you for the great work you're doing there, Neil. Neil and I share this great passion together. I mean, everything you said about me, I want to, just toss right back to you of a gratefulness for what you're doing there in Florida and bringing all those people together. You do, and now you're having virtual events, and you just got a brand new church, and it looks beautiful to me from the pictures I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Place. We're lucky.
Yeah, I can't wait to come and visit you there. But hey, I want to say hi to everybody here online. Greetings to all my fellow radical life extension enthusiasts and advocates. I'm very excited to be on here with you today. You're all amazing people, and I want you to be with me and all your like-minded people in San Diego, October 6th through 9. Hi, Karen. I see you. Karen's going to be there, I believe. Good to see you. I see others I recognize. Yeah, Tanya. Hi, Tanya. Thank you for all your help in promoting Thank you for your help in promoting RAADfest. And there's Keith. Hi, Keith. And many others of you. Yeah, I'm just really happy to see you here today. Hey, hi, Eric. Hi, Eric. Yeah. Greetings. So, yeah, join us in San Diego. Neil's been for Radical Life Extension. It's so important, guys, that we come together. We've been held up for 2 years, and we need you there because numbers make a difference. We're going to have a lot of press consequences. Unfortunately, a lot of our fellow Radical Life Extension advocates overseas aren't able to make it in the United States to have to be vaccinated. So many of those won't be coming, but some will. So that's great. But we're going to have a fantastic time and difference. Each of us makes a difference in this movement. Each one of you are important, and I want you alive. And you'll meet all kinds of people there. If you haven't been to RAADfest, you'll meet all kinds of people there that want you alive and have a lot of great messages for you and how to stay alive. One of them, like you just heard, Dr. Kaufmann, she'll be there. What an extraordinary person she is, isn't she? I mean, oh my God, and she's so grateful for RAADfest because RAADfest introduced her to this community of super longevity. She'd never really been in it before. I came in contact with her through, I think it was Bill Andrews, Dr. Bill Andrews, and then he introduced me to her, and I asked her to speak at RAADfest. I think it was 2017 or 18 was her first time. So anyway, well, she's really added so much to all of us since then, right? I mean, what a presentation today. So I just want to urge you guys. In fact, not only urge you, I want to tell you because everybody. So we want to give you a special discount of 20% off any registration. That's if you come live, if you come on virtually. Now, obviously, I like to be there live because I like to be with you. And that's the greatest impact for each other is to be there live. That's where we really make a difference together. But I'm happy if you absolutely can't make that, I'd be happy to have you on virtually. And so we are doing a hybrid event, like Neil said. So you can be on virtually, and that's also 20% off. So you can go online to raadfest.com. look at the registrations and pick out what works best for you. But one way or another, do it, please. We need you, every one of you. Don't discount yourself. Don't count yourself out in this movement, and don't think that this is a movement for the most vast, I'll say, most important advancement in humankind that's ever been. And don't leave yourself out and be a part of it. As history, we go through time, and you want to be added in those history pages to say you were there. You were there to help make this movement go. So, hey, I got a lot of appreciation for you all, and I won't take any more time here. I can keep going because I'm just very stirred by all of you. But we're going to be talking about a lot of fantastic things at RAADfest. We have so many great doctors and scientists and enthusiasts there. They'll be sharing their hearts out with you, including Bell Falloon, as you know. He'll be doing a keynote expression on the opening night and giving us a real amazing update on all the new therapies and modalities. And not only that, you'll be able to go into the RAAD City Hall. That's what's important, to be there in person, where all the exhibits are. And you'll be able to come in contact with all the great new innovations and the new supplements, everything that's there to extend your life and to help you live a more vital, more strength-filled, abundant life. And so, yeah, that's a key thing why it would be important for you to be there in person. And I think anybody who's been there can witness that. That exhibit hall is amazing. We call it the marketplace of the future. People that are actually profiting from life rather than death. And let's support them. So again, either go online, be with us online, or be with us in person. In person's preferably to me, because I want to see you and I want to be with you. We're going to celebrate coming back together. So it's going to be not only a great, fantastic amount of super longevity information, but there's going to be a lot of super longevity inspiration. Believe me. So, hey, love you all, and thank you for giving me this time and listening to me. And again, thank you, Neil. I appreciate it for contacting me today, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Well, Jim, I'm so glad you're able to be with us. And as Jim said, this is one of the best ways to invest in your health and longevity. So if there's anything you're going to do this year, go to the RAADfest. RAADfest is, I think, number one thing that should be on your list, on your to-do list.
Yeah,
thank you, Jim.
Let me just add this. I think I said it, Neil. Thank you for that. We're coming together. This is an opportunity too for us to come together. All of us who have this same like-minded, inspired feeling about living. It's an opportunity for us to come together and really celebrate our lives together. No matter what area or arena you're working in, or where what your background is, RAADfest is an opportunity, is a place that everybody can celebrate this new life together. So again, thank you very much.
That's right. And we're actually catching Jim in between two appointments. I'm so glad you could connect with us, Jim. Thank you for tonight.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. Super great. All right. So I want to thank you all for attending our event tonight. It was exciting to hear Aubrey's important information tonight. It was great to get that. Great to get Jim's input here at the end, and Dr. Kaufmann's always wonderful to hear. So it's been a good evening, a good event tonight. You can share this with your friends and your family, those that you love. Let them know about the events that we're having. Next month, we'll be back October 27th, Thursday evening at the regular time, opening for social hour at 6 p.m. with the formal presentation at 7 p.m. I want to thank you again for attending, and be sure to get our monthly email newsletter for updates and other updates of discoveries that are happening for health and longevity, technologies that can help you live a longer and healthier life. Good night for now from the Church of Perpetual Life. It's been my pleasure to be your host.